Hey, Amber,
Yeah,
that's a cool looking spot. Where are you?
I'm actually,
In the
I,
sauna.
I'm sorry.
In the sauna.
It does look like I'm in the sauna. I'm actually in New York City, and I'm in the little tiny corner of a lobby of a hotel.
Oh gosh, if they're handing out prizes, you get it today.
All right, I like that. I do kind of look like I'm in a sauna. That's hilarious. I don't know if I want to be in a sauna and a meeting at the same time, but a sauna sounds good.
Yeah, you may want to decorate it a little bit. It did look pretty cool.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh.
How's
So you're in New York City?
yeah.
Well, wow, cool. Are you there for a while?
Yeah, I'm taking my daughter to school, and so we had some stuff that we needed to do here first, and
Oh
so
wow.
we're getting on a train to head up to Boston
Oh,
here soon. But yeah, they are requiring vaccine cards to go into restaurants and gyms and everything here now.
oh gosh, is that right?
Yeah, which I think is great, of course, but um,
A little bit
yeah,
of a difference from here.
a very big difference. How is your grandson?
Oh, that's really because my daughter-in-law is Japanese. She is ultra conservative with germs, COVID, everything. And I think there might even be some Japanese culture there, but we've not seen our grandchild yet.
Oh, you haven't seen him. Okay. Well, have you seen pictures though?
Yeah, they sent us some pictures. Um, and I think my son said we might be able to see him this Saturday. Yeah, we're just trying to be really cool with that whole thing. I mean, they
It's
just
hard to
live
be
like,
cool and patient at the same time.
oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's but he's really a good looking boy. Everything worked out well. And it's hard to believe I'm a grandpa.
I know. I know.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. You'll see him soon.
Yeah.
Are you getting, just since I'm talking, are you getting much background noise when I'm talking?
I hear a little bit. What are you in the lobby?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it's not bad. I mean,
Okay.
I can hear you.
Okay. I think this will be mainly listening today. So, okay, good. I'm gonna mute
So
myself then.
what school is your daughter going to?
She's going to Tufts in Boston.
Oh, yeah. Oh my gosh, that's great. Is this her first year?
It is, yeah.
Wow. Is that your oldest daughter?
It is, yep, yep. So we're going to be one down,
That's a big,
at home.
yeah, that's a big one. When they go off to school, it's pretty different.
Yeah, yeah, it is. We're not there yet, but we're really close.
Yeah, our she'll start her third year at MSU. And this was the first summer she didn't come back. And
Oh,
yeah, that was kind of different. I mean,
yeah, hate that.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's all part of it. Just have to
Yeah,
accept it and know that that's normal.
yeah. She's ready. She's very ready, but we're all gonna miss her
Oh gosh,
for
yes.
sure.
How old is your other one?
16. Yeah, so
Oh yeah, so
I've got a couple more years.
you got a couple more years. That's great.
Yeah, she might miss her more than any of us, but
Hmm.
okay, I'm gonna mute myself now. Nice chatting with you though.
You bet. Hey Heather.
Good morning, John. We missed you.
Yeah, I missed it too.
Yeah.
I had a 7 hour carpet cleaning job that Monday, and it kicked my back end.
I bet it did. That's a lot of time on your feet.
It really is. I had never done a job that long before, and I had help, but there was no stopping. We didn't even have lunch until I was done, and that was 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So that'll be the last time I do that one.
Let someone else do it. Yeah, do it again.
Yes, yes. So how you doing?
Oh, pretty good. Very happy we have some cooler weather
Oh
for
my gosh, isn't that great?
yeah. It's I think we are all just literally burnt out. So it's good to have some reprieve there.
Yeah, it's really nice timing. It's also nice to be able to look out the window and see the mountains.
Good to hear.
Or in my case,
Oh, don't.
signs.
All right, good morning, everybody. It's the stroke of 8 o'clock, and we've got a long day. So we're going to get started. I will call Budget Committee of the Whole to order for today, Wednesday, August 18th. We continue to meet virtually. We have our customary slide up for ways to participate if you are a member of the public, to raise and lower your hand and do so using *9 on a landline or on clicking more on a iPhone or Android. We've also got our regular routes for public comment outside the meeting that include our voicemail and our email. You can go ahead and take that down. Our first item is roll. People are still straggling in a bit, but let's go ahead and call roll.
All right. Stacy Anderson. Looks like she's here yet.
Not yet.
Mirta Becerra.
Not
Not
seen
yet. John Contos.
Here.
Heather Harp.
Here.
Jordan Hess.
Here.
Gwen Jones.
Here.
Julie Merritt. Here. Jesse Ramos.
That's from Jessica.
Not here yet. Amber Sherrill.
Present.
Sandra Vasica.
I think Sandra's not going to be able to join today.
Okay, Brian von Lossberg,
I'm here.
and Heidi West.
Not seeing Heidi yet.
Okay, so we have 7 members present, 5 currently not here yet.
Thank you. We have minutes to approve from August 11th. Any changes to those minutes? Seeing none, those will stand approved. Is there any public comment on non-agenda items? Everything today is budget related. Not seeing any public comment on non-agenda items. We'll get into our last BCAL of the year. We're gonna start out, just quick overview. We're gonna go to noon. I'm gonna try to get a break in between Public Works and Parks. Those are both roughly 2-hour presentations. There's a half-hour break, and then we'll get back going from 12:30 to 2:30 if my memory serves. With that, it's not clear to me, Dale, you might be able to help. Who is kicking us off with Public Works, or Lee, perhaps?
There we have Jeremy Keene, our Director of Public Works.
Oh, Jeremy, are you under Public Works and Mobility?
Your Public Works and Mobility today.
There you go. The floor is yours.
Okay,
One point of order. There's some, Jeremy, I don't know if you have some PWM staff as an attendees. I don't know if you need them promoted to panelist.
we're going to do it all from this screen, so we'll just trade places here.
All right.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jeremy Keene. I'm the Director for Public Works and Mobility. And are you seeing my slide okay?
We are.
Great. Okay, thanks for the opportunity to present our budget this morning. We have 5 different presenters because we believe in teamwork in Public Works, and also because I believe you should surround yourself with smarter people. We'll pause after each section and allow for some questions and answers. And we'll aim to get through this in about 2 hours. I'd like to just take a moment to recognize Marie Nolan and Katie Emery for this beautiful new logo that they put together for Public Works. It really captures all of the different things that we do. And I also want to thank Allison Siegel, our business finance manager, for doing the heavy lifting on putting this presentation together. So our mission in Public Works is really about providing high quality public infrastructure and services. We take great pride in what we do to serve the community, and we have a dedicated staff that's committed to this mission. Public Works is 5 different divisions. We have 173 different team members, staff, and it's a resilient group. We've had a lot of key retirements in the past year, challenges with COVID, people in new roles and new faces, and they rose to the challenge. We continue to be a high-performing department. Our goals in Public Works really relate to providing that critical infrastructure and service that helps us function as a city. Clean water, safe streets, healthy environment. We do that as stewards of the public money, and we are careful about our decision-making and the efficiency and fiscal responsibility with which we provide those services. And all of this comes back to providing value for our customers, Missoula residents. Our goals are really based on the city's strategic framework and the mayor's goals that are outlined in his 2021 executive budget. Operational excellence, what this means for Public Works and Mobility is that we're seeking to ensure that our infrastructure systems are maintained to be reliable and efficient, and that we have the people, equipment, and technology to continue to provide those services with resiliency and sustainability. We also work across departments to contribute to those citywide goals, investing strategically in infrastructure to support housing, both in existing neighborhoods where we're seeing infill and in new growth areas like the Setupcane area or the Scott Street area. And we're looking to leverage city-owned land to help increase that housing supply. We're also looking at our process and our regulations to make development easier and more affordable. We're also working to create healthier neighborhoods. Safety and equity receive the highest emphasis in determining our transportation projects to include in our budget. We recognize that all transportation is prone to human error and that safer design can reduce the consequences when people do make mistakes. Safer streets also help with providing more mobility options, and that provides more equity because we recognize that not everyone can drive and that we do need to work to be more sustainable in the way we provide transportation. The built natural environment is really at the core of what we do in Public Works. We're investing in projects that lead to good growth. The pandemic, with the pandemic, we saw rapid growth in Missoula. And we expect that over the next 25 years, we're going to need to accommodate another 40,000 people in Missoula. So all of this adds pressure on housing, on infrastructure, transportation systems, our open spaces, and the environment. So we're investing in projects that help guide that growth and provide the places we'll need to accommodate a greater population. Some of the examples are the Mullen Build area, the Waterworks Hill Trailhead project, the Rattlesnake Dam restoration project, and the Flynn Lowney ditch acquisition. All this really comes back to providing value. A couple of examples. The average household cost for a gallon of water is 0.4 cents from Missoula Water. If you had to buy that same water in a bottle, it would cost you $1.15 a gallon. That's 287 times more expensive. The average household pays about $9 a month in road district. So for 30 cents a day, you get your streets plowed, swept, striped, maintained. This lets you get to work, to school, lets you get food, lets you get your Amazon deliveries. Think about what other services you pay for that provide you better value. These are things that the government does well, things that the private sector can't do individually. And by providing this infrastructure and services collectively, we can make it more affordable for everyone. We pride ourselves on providing that value and keeping our services affordable. And we are constantly learning and innovating to provide those services more efficiently. We do have some challenges. Much of our infrastructure is 50 to 100 years old. We haven't reinvested, and that's really resulted in a lot of deferred maintenance. We also have limited options for funding. We lost the voter-approved local option fuel tax. It was repealed by the legislature. That tax had generated over $300,000 in a little over 6 months during the time that was in effect. Like everyone, we're seeing significant inflation. This is affecting the cost of materials, fuel, equipment, and people. The consumer price index was 5.4% through June of 21. So we're seeing much higher inflation than we have in the past, and that's affecting our projects. We have a tight workforce. The labor market has tightened considerably. And we have a duty to act on the environment. This is something that we can't continue to kick down the road. We need to take steps now to work on climate change. We're doing all this while we're growing. So we have more stuff to take care of and more road miles as we create new neighborhoods. If we're smart, we grow our tax base with us as that growth happens. That requires thoughtful land use planning and density to cover the cost of those new infrastructures and services. And we have to ask you each year as representatives of the taxpayers to increase our budget so that we can continue to provide that same level of service that our customers expect. So if you think we just have a spending problem, all I can say is that a failure to act now is going to cost us more later. Our budget reflects what we need to do now and in the near future to maintain that level of service and make smart investments. You'll see that in the requests for rate increases for the utilities and requests for increases in staffing and equipment. We're working to act now so we can do this over multiple years, so we can grow intentionally and we can avoid large reactionary increases later. This isn't our only strategy. We're also aggressively pursuing grant opportunities with the ARPA bill and the new infrastructure bill that's coming. So we're looking to diversify our funding sources as much as possible. We expect you to hold us accountable. We've identified some target metrics that we can measure over time to see how we're doing, to measure our progress. We're working to replace 1% of our water mains each year. This roughly equates to a 100-year replacement schedule. So as those pipes wear out, we're replacing them. We're not there yet, but we're continuing to increase our program of water main replacement. We're seeking to maintain our streets in satisfactory condition. This equates to a pavement condition index of about 70. And what this means is that this is the condition of a street that we can continue to do preventative maintenance, things like chip seals and crack seals and overlays, before they become more expensive repairs with full reconstruction. We want to triple the number of multimodal trips by 2045. This equates to a reduction in single occupancy vehicle trips by about 50%. So this is an investment in multimodal infrastructure, and this makes sense from an environmental standpoint as well as a fiscal standpoint, because in many cases, it's less expensive to provide this multimodal infrastructure. And we recognize that we will never have enough money to build streets for everyone to drive a car all the time for all of their trips. We want to eliminate serious and fatal injuries on our streets. This idea of Vision Zero is something that's been adopted statewide. We're adopting it locally as well. We think that our streets need to be safe. And we're committed to helping support 600 housing units each year. This is the target number that's identified in our growth policy. That number will change over time as our population demographics change, but Public Works plays a role in helping provide that housing supply. And we're committed to reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. Public Works as a department is responsible for the greatest share of greenhouse gas emissions of any city department. We think that we can attain a 10% reduction in the next 5 years with attainable measures that we can do right now. So things like pump replacement, leak reduction, adding solar power to our facilities, looking at how carbon capture and green infrastructure affect that greenhouse gas footprint, and looking at green power purchase. Our budget in total is about $80 million. This includes our capital projects and grants. You can see that the majority of our revenue comes from charges from services. Those are rates for utilities, and grants being the second largest category there at 19%. Expenditures. The bulk of our expenditures is in capital projects. That's $41 million, about 53% of our budget. Interestingly, personnel is about a fifth of our budget, 20%. So even though we are a highly people-dependent department, it is only about a fifth of our budget that covers salaries and benefits. So I'll stop there for a moment. Any questions before I continue on into some more of the specific departments?
I see one from Julie.
Jeremy, can you go back? Maybe it was 2 slides. Oh, I know what my question was. On the views of trying to add solar to some of the facilities. I know there was been some discussion about that with the potential site out by the airport. And are you guys willing, even if solar isn't able to provide the full amount of the power that's needed, have you talked about still adding solar, even if it only just reduces the power demand instead of providing the full demand?
Yeah, right now our best option to add solar is at the wastewater treatment plant, and the way that the regulations are set up, it has to be done behind the meter. And so basically that means that you use solar to power a portion of your power demand, and then you also buy power from the grid. So we're working on a solar project at the wastewater treatment plant. We think there may also be opportunities as we add new wells out near the airport to either do solar or to buy green power from Missoula Electric Cooperative. So we're looking at both of those options.
Thank you.
Heather?
Thanks, Brian. Jeremy, on the same slide of target metrics, can you talk a little bit about how your department will support permitting of 600 housing units each year?
Well, we'll do that through a couple of different ways. One is helping to leverage city land. A lot of it Public Works controls. The other way is through supportive projects where we're providing infrastructure to help support that housing. And finally, in just working through our regulations to make sure that our process is as efficient as possible to help get those projects through the system and on the ground for construction.
Thank you.
Jordan?
Thanks. I know different industries have different balances of payroll versus other functions, and like you mentioned, Public Works is very capital intensive because of all the projects. Is there a sort of a best practice of what percentage of a budget in an organization like yours is payroll and personnel services?
I don't have a good metric on that. And one thing I will say about this budget is that it changes depending on how much capital how many capital projects you're doing. And so this budget, if you compared this to last year, this is a much larger piece of capital investment, largely because we have the build grant, because we have ARPA money going into capital projects. So this number is larger than it's been in the past. So it's going to vary from year to year.
Okay, I guess it'd be interesting to track over time, and then to look at how you feel your staff capacity is holding up. I mean, I imagine that if we were to sustain this level of investment over a very long period of time, we'd need additional staffing to support that. But it'd be interesting to track that and get your impressions on the trajectory of our staffing needs.
Yeah, you'll see some later in the presentation, some of the ways that we're tracking staff levels versus other metrics. So things like road miles, our ability to execute these projects, capital projects, really relies on having the amount of staff necessary to carry them out. And so we're looking at new staff positions to help with some of these capital projects.
Okay, great. Thank you.
John?
Yeah, could you go back one more slide? One more. Okay, maybe one more. Gosh. I saw it, but I can't remember. It was something about mobility. I didn't really understand that one. That wasn't it. Sorry about that.
My suggestion, John, would be to the presentation is posted in the draft budget list, and I'd approach Jeremy with an email or something.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, let's go ahead, Jeremy. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to just talk briefly about administration, then I'm going to hand off to Aaron Wilson to talk about infrastructure and mobility. So administration is composed of our administrative services group, business and finance, communication, safety, and risk management. There are 4 areas of focus here for us this year: people, organization, communication, and risk management. We've taken a proactive approach to recruitment and retention. We have 21 new hires in the past year, 9 internal promotions. We've been working hard on pay equity, and we've been working to create some career ladders for folks. So this is addressing things that have been kind of left behind as inflation has happened, as the market has changed, and we're recognizing we need to do more to keep our good people and to make sure that they're being paid fairly, and looking at how they compare with other positions throughout the city and other similar positions in other organizations. We're also still working on the realignment that happened last fall. We did a big realignment with community planning, development, and innovation, which included moving transportation planning and engineering over to Public Works. We've created a business finance manager and a business operations manager position. So Katie Emery is now our business operations manager, which really gives us that financial and operations function in two separate positions, simply to deal with the size of our department. They've both done a great job in helping us better serve a large department. I think we've also done a better job of communicating what we do. There are a lot of different ways we're doing that. An annual report, Engage Missoula site's been very successful. We've got a strong following on social media, and we're still doing a quarterly newsletter that goes out to 22,000 people with their utility bills. And then we've also really tried to look at providing a safe work environment for our employees and for the public. We're doing driver safety training. Every single employee that drives a city vehicle is getting a driver safety training class this year. And we're also working through building security along with what's happening at City Hall and council chambers. So a couple new requests related to those goals. These fall into different divisions, but reflect that operational excellence goal in administration. We made a lot of progress with salary adjustments in FY21. We'd like to continue that in FY22. Unfortunately, a lot of these were not funded in the mayor's budget for a variety of reasons, including the ability to support these requests with current rates and assessments, and the citywide effort to look at compensation. Of course, there is a citywide cost of living adjustment in the budget already. But our ability to work on these things really affects our ability to retain staff and hire new staff. And we'll look to find other savings in our budget to help support salary adjustments. But these are some of the challenges that we'll be faced with this year without these particular budget requests in our budget. So with that, I'll take any additional questions, and then I'm going to pass off to Aaron Wilson.
Thanks a lot, Jeremy. And I'll quickly say I appreciate the high-level organizational overview of the total employees and budget and stuff. I appreciate when the departments do that. So I don't see any questions. Why don't we go ahead and move on?
Okay, thank you.
All right, well, thanks everyone for having us here. I'm Aaron Wilson, the Infrastructure Mobility Planning Manager for the Public Works and Mobility Department. And I'm going to get the infrastructure mobility section kicked off and share some of this time with Ross Mollenauer, who's going to talk some about the engineering side of infrastructure mobility. So we have two main sections that in this division of Public Works and Mobility. We have the planning side, which is really looking long-term at our long-range goals, planning, prioritization, some of our programs, and thinking about primarily transportation. There are three main components to that: the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is our federal transportation planning role in Public Works and Mobility. We also have Missoula in Motion, which is primarily focuses on our programs and education and outreach, really engaging people around transportation options and sustainable transportation. And then we have our bicycle and pedestrian program and city transportation planning that is really more focused on the city-specific aspects of the work that we do. And then within engineering, we have all of our utility, surface transportation, and development review engineering functions that Ross will talk in a little bit more detail about. So in infrastructure and mobility planning, this is, again, really our long-term thinking about how we prioritize our investments, what are our anticipated needs in terms of growth and development, and how we're going to support that through our investments over time. And it's a little bit of a different function that we have in terms of our goals, because we have the federal component, the MPO, where those goals are really in part set by the federal government. We're implementing those at a regional level, and we're working with the county and MDT as part of the Metropolitan Planning Organization. That said, we're still working to help the city as part of the MPO, and so we are incorporating the city's goals into the work that we do. So thinking about what Jeremy went over and our participation in citywide goals, we first and foremost, we're thinking about strategic investment and how we're growing our transportation system and supporting growth and development around Missoula. The primary way we do that is through our long-range transportation plan, which we just completed a substantial update of that plan over the last year and a half. That was approved and adopted back in June. And so we have a really good foundation for thinking about the next 30 years. That's a really long range plan, looking at what funding we have available and how we're going to invest it. So that's our regional look, looks at big picture goals and objectives. But we also work on more targeted, smaller scale projects. So a good example of that is the neighborhood traffic management program that we completed and have that in place over the last year. And we're going to continue implementing that. This is a project where we're looking at neighborhood streets and looking at ways to make targeted investments that are we call them quick build, or they're really low cost. We can deploy them and address safety issues. We can help with addressing community issues in neighborhoods. And we can do that really effectively and systematically. And so it's a data-driven approach to making investments that will have high impact in our neighborhood streets. So those are a couple of examples of how we're doing strategic investment. We're also involved in promoting equity and sustainability through all of the work that we do. But another good example is our CIP prioritization process, our community investment program, where we have started to look at our transportation investments and what projects we're bringing forward and trying to maximize safety and equity. So how are we addressing some of our pressing equity goals through our transportation investments? And so you'll see that reflected in our CIP requests and some of the investments in our transportation system. We're also initiating in the upcoming year and have started on a transportation demand management action plan. So this is a strategy to try to start integrating sustainable transportation, that multimodal approach to accommodating our growth in the region through development and working with businesses and other private sector partners to make sure that we're adequately considering multimodal transportation as we grow, not just through our infrastructure investments, but in our developments and businesses as well. We're also working to address affordable housing through those infrastructure investments. So looking at opportunities to support areas where we're seeing affordable housing or projects. A good example in this last year was the Maple Street Sidewalk project that helped support the Trinity affordable housing and provide good transportation access to that project. We also have a couple of complete street projects in the neighborhoods. Eaton Street is an area where we're seeing a lot of development in the neighborhood. Some of that is affordable housing. The Turner Warden Sidewalk and Complete Street project is going to help provide transportation access to the Scott Street development site that we've been hearing a lot about, and helping to mitigate the impacts of that affordable housing, but also providing good transportation access to those sites. And then finally, through mobility, safety, and wellness, where we have a number of projects that are helping just think about safety, more of a corridor or site-specific aspect of the work that we do. So Missoula in Motion, recently we continue to provide programming that helps highlight our sustainable transportation investments. So this summer, we had our Sunday Streets event in the neighborhood with Franklin to the Fort, where we had just done some quick build traffic calming along our neighborhood greenways on Schilling and addressed safety issues on Kemp. We also, that was paired with a neighborhood grant from the city for the neighborhood neighbors to do some planters and murals on those traffic calming to help build some community character. And then we held our Sunday Streets event on those routes to help highlight those as sustainable transportation corridors. So trying to merge all of our activities to highlight the work that we're doing and to help build community. We're also focused on improving some transportation corridors. So we recently completed our Highway 200 corridor plan to help improve transportation through the East Missoula corridor. And then we're kicking off work on our Higgins corridor to try to think about how we pull all of the infrastructure investments along Higgins together, taking the new bridge that's coming online and thinking about how that translates into improvements on the Hip Strip and north of the river. So again, trying to address a wide breadth of different activities, both in the last year and coming up this year. So in order to support that work that we're doing, we have 2 new requests coming from infrastructure mobility planning. The first is requested increase in our local match for Missoula in Motion. This is a fairly small new request of a little over $2,000, but that investment will leverage an additional about $15,000 in federal funding to bring into our transportation demand management work. This is really critical in what we do. We know from research across the country that it's not just the infrastructure you build, but it's also how you highlight that infrastructure and help people understand how to use it and encourage that multimodal transportation. And Missoula in Motion is a national leader in TDM. We just had the opportunity to talk to transit professionals from across the country who were here for a conference last week. We did a bike tour, and many of them indicated that they look to Missoula as their peer city of what to do around TDM. And so this will help us continue that work and work with the businesses and developers that we've had a significant increase in contact in working on TDM plans and thinking about how we implement that multimodal transportation. So our second request is related to an additional transportation planner. This position, the funding is split about 50% is going to come from the MPO in those federal transportation planning funds. That was just approved by our committee yesterday. The other half will come from city funding. And the goal of this position is to situate ourselves to be able to get projects moving from all this great planning work we've done into development, design, and then construction. And so we know we have over $100 billion potentially of new infrastructure, road and bridge funding coming from the federal government. We need projects that are shovel ready and that we can have the capacity to apply for grants, get those projects into development and ultimately into construction. And so this position will really help us with that, helping design projects, get that conceptual design, work with engineering, help apply for the grant funding, and then ultimately help manage those projects as we move forward. So that added capacity is going to be really instrumental in making sure we can maximize any potential grant funding coming out of the federal government and that we can continue to move our own projects forward. So related to that, our local funding, our CIP requests coming out of infrastructure and mobility are broken into 2 main categories. This is a continuation of what we started last year in the CIP. Many of these projects are continuing. We've been working on them over the last year, moving them from design into engineering and ultimately into construction. So we have about $3.8 million in roadway improvements. These are our complete streets, things like South Avenue improvements that will create a complete street from Reserve Street out through the Fort Missoula Regional Park. We also have funding for Lower Miller Creek Road reconstruction and anticipating or helping support the school and some of the new development in Miller Creek and a number of other projects. These are funded through our road district, gas tax. There are some grants included in that and a variety of different funding, but good projects that are helping to expand our mobility options, but also support the growth that we're seeing around Missoula. We also are continuing our sidewalk and mobility programs. We have 9 projects here that are a combination of sidewalks, neighborhood greenways, improving transit facilities, and really, again, looking at multimodal. So this is a change from past years where we had previously had about $600,000 in subsidy for sidewalk projects. We've now leveraged that up to about a little over $2 million going towards sidewalks and neighborhood greenways. A lot of which are in our neighborhoods where we can make some real equity gains, like the north side, west side, and Franklin to the Fort neighborhood that were identified through programs like Invest Health as neighborhoods that really need these transportation investments. So really trying to accelerate our investment in sidewalk and multimodal transportation infrastructure. Then we have a couple of new CIP projects this year. One is the Wayside Horns project. This is a series of investments and improvements that will allow trains to reduce the noise from blowing horns. It's a pretty substantial decrease in the amount of noise from those horns, and a fairly modest investment of about $170,000. So this will allow trains to travel through Missoula much quieter, and we won't have that disruption of as they approach crossings, blowing their horns and really creating an impact. And as we see more increased train traffic through Missoula, this is going to be really beneficial to those neighborhoods that are experiencing that noise impact. And that is funded primarily through tax increment financing. So from the Hellgate Urban Renewal District is going to contribute to that project. And then we have our continuing CIP projects related to the Mullen area. We have our build project. We've heard a lot about this project over the last several years. So not a lot to update here other than we continue to invest in that. It's nearly $20 million of combined transportation impact fees, water and wastewater development funds, and that $13 million federal grant that's really going to build out the transportation infrastructure and utilities in an area where we're seeing rapid growth. And this is another area where we can hopefully affect some of that affordable housing by getting the infrastructure in place and allowing that development to occur as quickly as possible. That project was delayed by a year because of as Jerry mentioned, our inflation and rapidly increasing costs, but we've been working over the last year to try to get those costs back down, and the construction will start, is anticipated to start in this next upcoming year. So that project continues. We also have the Flynn Lowney Ditch acquisition. So this is a really exciting project where we can really impact a lot of public good around both our natural environment by reducing the impact on our river from that ditch, by shutting off the diversion ditch, helping with some of the stream bank erosion, fish habitat, and preventing fish diversion into the ditch. But it's also going to help with the build grant. So it's saving us over $600,000 in costs on the build grant by purchasing this ditch. So the request is for, excuse me, about $990,000, but we will save close to $600,000 of that from the Mullen Build project. So it's a great project that's a public-private partnership. There are grants and donations, and is really going to serve a lot of public good by making that acquisition. So in the planning budget, just a quick overview. Most of our budget is in the planning side is grant funded. So that intergovernmental is a combination of our federal PL funds, our congestion mitigation and air quality federal grants, and then we have some miscellaneous income from match. So we have a number of other partners that are contributing to that local match. And then a small amount of transfer from the general fund to cover the city transportation planning functions in the bike ped program. Our expenditures match really closely with our revenues because we're really just spending what we have in grant funding. And so you'll see the bulk of that is in personnel services. We have small increases to that due to our union contract and adding in some additional staff increases. And then you'll see a lot of fluctuation year to year in our services. So that is our consultant services that we do for projects. We had a fairly substantial decrease in spending on that because we've wrapped up the long range plan. That was the bulk of our consultant services. And we will continue with a couple of projects, but starting to wind that down and think more about implementation. And then we have some grants and contributions that are passed through funds where we get federal funding that we pass through to other recipients like Mountain Line or other partners. So that's a quick overview of our budget. I think now I'm going to hand it over to Ross to talk about engineering, and then we'll answer some questions after that.
Thanks, Aaron. Welcome, Ross.
Thanks, Aaron. Mess this all up. There we go. I'm Ross Mullenhauer. I am the city engineering manager. Thanks for giving us a few minutes here. I just wanted to update you all on some of the accomplishments, and then I'll get into the goals really quick. I think it's been a big year for city engineering. We have reorganized. We've kind of moved some staff around as Jeremy pointed out with the realignment. And so now city engineering is grouped into 3 sections, which really, I think, supports the mission of city engineering. The sections are surface transportation, which is, I think the mission is to support our mobility networks, providing engineering services we can for the mobility networks. And then the utility engineering, again, we're there to support the utilities however we can with our engineering needs, and then development review. And we've built really good teams with all 3 of those areas. So moving past that, I guess the other accomplishments we've gotten to this year, we've released a new public works manual. In the past, a lot of the engineering rules were kind of spread out over codes and standard details and ordinances, and we've tried to organize all those into a one-stop place, and we've heard really good comments from the consultant community about that. We've also I wasn't able to list all the accomplishments, obviously, but we picked a few here that we thought stood out. One for the water utility or the utility engineering is we've achieved or obtained $7 million in SRF funding for water main replacements. And then speaking to the development pressure, we've reviewed and approved 1,737 housing units. So those are, I think there's probably been a lot of different metrics thrown out there for this kind of thing. And I wanted to point out that these are created lots, not building permits. So, you know, we review the subdivisions and developments that come to us. And then I think Aaron Pehan's group would, you know, they'd be reviewing those for building permits in the future. So I think this speaks to the number that are coming down the pike towards Missoula. The fact that there is a lot of housing units in the works right now. All right, so moving on to FY22 goals. Again, I tried to pick some that I thought stood out. One of the things we're working on is to automate the engineering review process. The city building and commercial permits already go through a program called Excella, and the building department is using that very well right now. We would like to try to bring in the public infrastructure review process, basically what we do in engineering, into that same program. So we're working on that. We think that'll reduce the turnaround times of our reviews, as well as increase transparency. So we're excited to get that moving. We've also increased staff capacity. We had a goal to bring on 3 new engineers, one for each of the 3 major sections of city engineering. And we've actually, the budgets that you're seeing reflect that staff capacity, the additional staff capacity, and we've been successful. We've already gone through, and we're excited to bring on 3 new engineers that we've just made offers to. We think that having those engineers will improve our CIP delivery, as well as expedite the review process. We are looking to ramp up the water main replacement and sidewalk CIP programs. And before anybody else spots this, you can see there's a unit error here. Our goal is not to replace 1.75 linear feet of sidewalk. We hope to replace a little more than that. That should say 1.75 miles of sidewalk. I apologize for the error in the presentation. Hopefully we can do better than 2 feet of sidewalk.
That's setting the bar low.
Yeah. And then we also hope to do 2.3 miles of water main. I'd say these are the metrics reflect what we have in design right now. And Jeremy also mentioned the effort we're putting into greenhouse gas reduction. We've got different projects that we're looking at. Probably the one that's the most exciting is the solar farm at the wastewater treatment plant. You know, as you've probably seen in the news, the county is moving forward with a solar project at the detention center, and we've been talking to the county staff about that, and we think we hope that we can kind of follow along just behind them with some of the exciting efforts that they're doing on that project. And then last but not least is just to keep up with development pressure. I think that's probably our biggest goal, and that really takes a lot of our staff time in all 3 of the, you know, in surface and utilities and development. We spend a lot of time responding to developments right now. So moving forward, this is a quick overview of our budget expenditures. Keep in mind, this is just general fund. City engineering is paid for out of the utility funds as well as the road district. I think the other portions of the engineering budget will be shown later on in Logan's slides, and later on. I guess I wanted to call out the one number that stands out here is how the personnel services went up dramatically this year. And that isn't entirely accurate. That's really mainly due to the realignment that happened where a lot of staff that was in the development services department was moved over to engineering department. So that's what that's showing. The only increase in FTEs was one FTE, and that was the development engineer, which I just mentioned earlier. So with that, I guess, do we want to do any questions here for Aaron and myself before we move on to utilities?
Not seeing anyone queued up. Recommendation, actually a couple people will queue up. Real quick though, thanks Aaron and Ross. Since you'll be updating that the sidewalk thing, I would recommend adding an asterisk on this one that you just explained, the personnel services, to explain what you explained verbally. Absent that that explanation, it tells a story that isn't the right story, the accurate story. So I think it's just worth an asterisk or footnote. With that, Julie.
Thanks. I guess my question is for Aaron. First, I want to say thanks for the Sunday Streets effort and all of your staff members who were out to support that. That was a really great event in the Franklin to the Fort neighborhood. And I had a question about the transportation assistant planner. So the number that you had put up there was at 76,000 roughly. And so is the request, so half of that would be covered by transportation grants. So the request is actually like 38,000 from the general fund, or how would the other half of that affect the budget?
Sorry, I should have done a better job of explaining that. So yeah, 50% of that 76,000 would come from our transportation planning grants, which still are part of the budget. And so we still need that request approved for that. And then the other half would come out of road district or one of our other infrastructure funding sources, but from the city side. And the idea is that the PL funds would be sort of a short-term investment for a couple of years to get us to the point where we could fund that position wholly out of that we have enough work and we're able to fund that position, for the long term to help manage those projects.
Okay.
Does that answer your question? So yeah, 50% transportation grants, 50%. I think right now we're looking at taking that out of road district.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Thanks. Good question, Julie. Aaron, is that detail about the split recognized or shown on the new request form? Because that's usually where we get into the detail about funding sources and when things are split across revenue sources. And I see
yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
It should be on that new request form. Yes.
Okay. Great. Amber.
Yeah. Thanks for this question.
Sorry. Hang on, Julie. Did you have a follow-up?
Sorry, that just made a follow-up question pop into my head. I know, Aaron, it's been difficult to actually hire people. So if you were to get this position funded, what are your thoughts about how quickly we would be able to fill that position?
That's a good question. I think we've been fairly successful hiring planners recently, especially on the transportation side. And so I imagine the federal funds are on a federal fiscal year, and so those wouldn't be available until October 1. And it would take us a couple months to get advertised and hired anyways, but I don't anticipate too many issues finding somebody for that position.
All right, thank you.
Amber, sorry about that.
Thanks. Thanks. And my question is for Aaron as well. Will you go back one slide?
Or other way?
Okay, yeah. So with the roadway improvements, one of the things you mentioned was the gas tax funding this. And so I'm wondering how much of that, how much is the gas tax and how we're funding that?
Yeah, so that's statewide gas tax that comes from, so we have BARSA. I wish I could spell out that entire acronym. But essentially that's the statewide gas tax that was increased a number of years ago. And so I think we get close to $1 million a year out of that. That's split between maintenance and these capital improvement projects.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about the local one that we were going to need to figure out how to fund. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Jordan?
Thanks. I think it's the Bridge and Road Safety and Accountability Act, if I recall. I was wondering on the transportation planner position, if a portion, I guess, what if a portion of that could be eligible for MPO or federal funding? If I know that we need a transportation planner for local projects, but would it be possible to tailor that workload in a way where that could be split funded so that we could leverage some of those federal funds, or is that just really not the intent of this position?
So leveraging our PL funds.
Yeah, and I know that those funds are in short supply also, but I'm just wondering if there's options for other funding sources for at least a portion of that position.
Yeah, I think so. So what we're suggesting, or what we have proposed, is that 50% would be the PL fund. So 50% of the position is funded through PL. And there are eligibility, one of the reasons we need some city funding in this position is that there are limits on what we can use PL funds for. So we can't use it for engineering or, more of the project specific work once you get to that point. And so PL funds would help us get projects developed to that point. And then we have city funds to cover the work that would be more on the engineering and construction side of managing these projects.
Okay, I'm sorry. I misunderstood that. That makes a lot more sense. Thanks for clarifying that.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. I think we are ready to move on. I think utilities is up next.
Yep, thank you all.
Thank you.
And Logan, before you get started, I think it's Lisa. Could you make Gwen a co-host alongside me? I meant to ask that before, just in case my feed breaks out or for any just redundancy. Thanks.
Sure, no problem.
All right, Logan, thanks.
Thank you. I'm Logan McInnes. I'm the Deputy Director of Public Works for Utilities. Here to talk about our Utility Operations and Maintenance Division today. And the division is broken into these 4 areas shown below: utility billing, the water utility with service production and distribution departments, the wastewater utility with resource recovery facility, compost and collections departments, and then our stormwater utility. We'll start with talking about the water utilities. I'm going to start with goals for this year. As you all know, we leak a lot of water into the ground. So number 1 goal around here always needs to be about leakage. So as Jeremy and Ross have talked about previously, our goal is to ramp up our investment in water main replacements to 1% per year. The last 4 years, we've only been doing about 0.3% per year. This year, we're projecting about 0.6%. And we also intend to invest in new technology and training to find and fix leaks. So we can't just replace mains. We also need to find leaks that are occurring out in the system. Second goal is to continue improving coordination with other divisions in the city. We like to coordinate with streets and planning on projects such as the North 5th and 6th Street and Brooks and Mount projects. Energy efficiency also is a big goal for us. We're targeting replacing pumps that will have a 20-year or shorter payback realized by efficiency gains. And then, as has been discussed earlier, we want to drill a new well utilizing Missoula Electric Co-op's 95% clean energy portfolio. Next goal is to improve our billing accuracy. We intend to replace 4,900 AMI water meters. That stands for Advanced Metering Infrastructure. Unfortunately, our existing meters are failing at an extremely high rate. Right now, there's about 2,600 that are not functional, and hundreds more die every year. So we're doing our best to stay ahead of that curve. Our goal is to complete our AMI project by the end of FY24. Another big goal is employee retention and training. As Jeremy's talked about, we needed a water operations pay scale adjustment to level the playing field with kind of our streets and our wastewater groups. And then we're recognizing the need to plan for
upcoming retirements by continuing to develop new staff. And finally, we need to build financial capacity, planning for water rate increases to keep up with inflation and allow us to work toward our goal of replacing 1% of our water mains each year. I'm going to talk a bit about our new requests. So the water pay scale adjustments at $60,000 request that was funded. We've got a $32,000 request funded for overtime. Unfortunately, leaks and equipment breakdowns tend to happen in off hours, so overtime's sort of a necessary part of running these utilities. And then finally, we've requested an intern, and this fits with our goal of building staff for the future. So we want to, it's a good opportunity to find our future talent for the utilities. I'd like to talk about our CIP requests for water. About a $7.5 million request for water system improvements, and this is primarily 9 water main projects that Ross has talked about. So we'll be replacing 12,000 feet of water main this year. These projects are all designed, approved, and ready to go to bid this fall. Moving on to water production improvements, we have about $2.7 million, largely in 2 Lincoln Hills tanks replacements, and then some well and pump improvements that I've already talked about. And lastly, the miscellaneous improvements, $1.4 million, that's largely for the new water meters. And then miscellaneous things like Waterworks Hill project and some main upsizing projects. Talk a little bit about our FY22 revenue request for the water utility. We're proposing a 3% increase for both metered and unmetered customers. And as you can see here, 2021 rates are exactly the same rates that we had in 2011. So we've gone 10 years without a rate increase. And we're recognizing the need to start building the financial capacity with some rate increases. So right now, 3%, and we're projecting 5% for 23 and 24. I'd like to do a comparison with, how do our rates compare with others in Montana? And we're consistent, I believe, with others in Montana. Some are higher, some are lower. As you can see, we're kind of near the bottom there at about $41 a month, kind of the average residential rate as projected by the AE2S annual rate survey. Look at our proposed budget for FY22 for revenues. You'll see at the bottom line a pretty substantial increase in revenues, and that's largely driven by the SRF loans that Ross talked about earlier, and then about $3.5 million in ARPA. And then we've begun to accumulate development fees that y'all passed at the beginning of the year. So those things are all helping to increase our bottom line revenues. You'll see there's not much of an increase in charges for services despite the 3% increase. And I think with all the utilities, we're trying to do a better job of forecasting what our actual revenue is going to be. So that's just the reality is we're not going to see a big increase in our revenue from that because of just past budgeting. On to our projected expenditure budget for FY22. Bottom line, again, an increase from previous year, largely in that capital item where it's going to be a big year for capital, about 11.6 million. And unfortunately, the last year or two has been pretty challenging to deliver projects, due to COVID, due to the inflation increases you've heard about. And then it took us time to obtain the SRF financing. There was a lot of delays with project bidding. And so by the time we bid projects this year, we just got clobbered on bids. So now we're really well positioned to bid a bunch of projects out over the winter when you really should be bidding projects out. That we do reflect an increase in personnel budgets, and that's, like we've talked about hiring a new utility engineer, and then we've had to just make some adjustments in how we allocate billing and customer service, and that makes some changes for all the utilities as we try to allocate the people to the various utilities to, have our budgeting as accurate as we can to where the services are being received by the utilities.
Oh, one other thing I want to point out, we have a pretty decent decrease in fixed charges. And that's a result of the phase out of the payments in lieu of taxes that were part of the condemnation settlement. Onto the wastewater utility. As always, the focus is on water quality. We're targeting full compliance with our MDEQ discharge permit, solid waste permit, and industrial pretreatment permits. We're going to continue diverting about 1.3 million gallons per day of flow to the poplar plantation. And we need to determine a future path for the poplar plantation using our alternatives study that we've completed recently. Other big goals has been discussed is increasing our energy efficiency. Goal is to complete the design and third-party financing of a 462 kilowatt solar array out at the wastewater plant. Then Gene's got some other ideas of some additional carbon offset opportunities he wants to pursue. Again, want to improve coordination with other divisions, assist the street department with materials storage and street sweeping basins, and also coordinate with other entities in the city to develop an operation safe shelter site out at the treatment plant, if that's what the decision is made. Infrastructure renewal, of course, has got to be a big part of our goal. We intend to rehabilitate or replace 3 sewer lift stations this year and develop plans for 2 additional lift station projects. And we've got some UV disinfection system and some other miscellaneous improvements needed out at the resource recovery facility. Going to continue our focus on collection system maintenance. Pat's crew likes to clean 50% of our sewer mains each year, and he's targeting achieving that again this year. Also targeting zero gravity or step sewer backups, and he's been quite successful in that in the last number of years. And this year he wants to ramp up his TV inspections to inspect 10 miles of sewer mains. Then lastly, we need to build financial capacity. We need to keep up with the rate of inflation and allow us to work toward our goal of fully maintaining safe and robust operations in our wastewater utility. Talk a bit about new requests. We had an approved request for a new collection system vehicle. And then the plant and compost overtime was a request that hasn't been funded. And of course, overtime, like the water utility, we're going to have overtime. Things don't like to break down at convenient times. So we're going to have to be looking for savings in our budget throughout the year. And if hopefully we can accomplish that. And if not, then we'll have to come back with the mid-year adjustment. Additional new requests. So the plant compost replacement and depreciation. This is an item that in the past has been capital. We were requested to move it to operations this year. And just due to the financial constraints, these were not funded. So a lot of these are things that need to be done. Gene's going to look real hard at the list, pare the list down, and we're just going to have to obtain debt funding to do the things that really need to be done out at the wastewater facility. And lastly, the fuel, polymer, and natural gas inflationary adjustments. It's an item not funded currently. Again, we're going to have to look for savings elsewhere in the budget. And if not, then we'll have to come back with the mid-year adjustment because those costs obviously can't be avoided. Talk a little bit about our CIP requests for wastewater. For collections, we have about a $1.8 million request for those lift station projects I talked about primarily. At the resource recovery facility, it's about a $1.1 million request for UV improvements, energy efficiency, new control gates, replacing some effluent lift pumps, and some other things. And then about a $100,000 request at the compost facility. Let's look back at the history of our wastewater rates. So rates haven't changed over the last 3 years. We've been flat. So we're proposing a 9% increase this year, which is $1.33 per month for the average household beginning on January 1st. And we have our FCS rate study that supports these type of projected rate increases. And we expect that we're going to have similar rate increases the next couple of years as well to build that financial capacity. Now, this is an interesting one. This is, a comparison of wastewater rates throughout Montana, and you'll see us
at the top line. You know, we're less than half of almost everybody else in Montana and a fourth of some. So our rates are incredibly low, which is great, but it also hampers our ability to do some of the things we need to do to upgrade the facilities. And it also makes us ineligible for certain grant funds by having rates that are too low. So we believe we need to build up our rates over time. And talk a little bit about our revenue forecast for FY22. So bottom line, we have a pretty significant increase in proposed revenue. And a lot of that's due to ARPA, some SRF loans that we'll obtain. And then we do show about a 9.6% increase in charges for services. So it's kind of the 9% rate increase I talked about, as well as some projected increases in compost revenue. Jason's group is working really hard to market our compost and it's growing that business. So that's definitely a success story. Here's our expenditure budget for FY22. Bottom line, a modest increase from past years. Fairly significant increase in personnel services. And that's a combination of the new utility engineer, the new green waste inspector that we really needed. And I think we did have a union increase that hadn't been budgeted in the past. So that's kind of reflected in that increase. Onto the stormwater utility. These goals come out of our MS4 permit that we have with the DEQ. So these are things that we have to do every year. So public outreach is a big part of it. We're going to install markers at dry wells and inlets. We're going to expand signage, some of our nonprofit partnerships, community events, and social media. We need to work on our illicit discharge detection and elimination system. We need to map those discharges, and we conduct routine inspections of high priority outfalls. Construction site stormwater management's a big one with all the growth going on around here. So our goal is at a minimum to inspect 25% of our sites that have a city stormwater permit. And we intend to grow that over time as required by our permit. Post-construction site stormwater management also is an important aspect related to development. So Tracy's group's been working on an enforcement response plan for this, and then conducting and tracking post-construction inspections. They've also been working on a pollution prevention good housekeeping for municipal operations plan. So we want to make sure that all of our operations are complying with stormwater requirements, including streets and water and wastewater and everybody. Parks and Rec also. Training is a key goal for stormwater. They're going to develop some training videos on erosion control and spill prevention, and then continue hosting stormwater pollution prevention plan or SWIP administrator training. And finally, sampling and monitoring is a big requirement of our permit. So we intend to sample 6 locations twice annually, including at Karis Park. Talk a little bit about our CIP requests. That's stormwater quality improvements, $683,000. The big ticket item there is the Karis Park stormwater treatment system that we've got designed, approved, and ready to go. We've received some grant funding, but also need some debt to finish the project off. And then there's a few minor studies, Grantland, High Park, and Creek Crossing drainage improvements. And then a request also for about $250,000 for levee maintenance and certification. Look back at our stormwater rates. The stormwater utility was created in 2018 with a real low initial rate. 2020, that was increased a little over $4 a month for a typical residence. So now we're proposing a 3% increase for this year. And projecting out with our utility pro formas, looks like we might need more like 9% in 23 and 24. Over on the right, a comparison with, how do other cities in Montana compare? And we're about in the middle for stormwater utility charges. Here's our enterprise fund revenue projection for FY22. Again, charges for services, actually, we're projecting a minor decrease, even though we're increasing rates 3%. And that's a kind of a reflection of attempting to do a more accurate job of projecting what our stormwater revenues are going to be. The new utility, it's been a challenge to project those revenues. So Allison's working hard to get those dialed in. And then we show some ARPA funds. As with all the utilities, we know that we have a minimum allocation that we're guaranteed from ARPA. And so that's reflected in our revenue budget. A bit of a decrease in the total revenue budget from FY21. Our expenditure budget's a bit of an increase. You'll see an increase in personnel services. That's a combination of things, paying for a portion of a new utility engineer. And for stormwater, we've had to revise allocations for customer service and billing and engineering. And so that's those changes are kind of reflecting in that personnel services budget increase. Otherwise, not a lot of changes. Capital budget's about $934,000, a bit higher than last year. I guess that's all I had for the utilities. So be happy to entertain questions.
Thanks, Logan. Real quickly, it's a good opportunity for me to just remind folks, colleagues and public, enterprise funds are not general fund dollars. These are funds secured by the services and the rates provided by the individual utilities. And Logan mentioned a number of proposed rate increases, which is part of utility management. Those are not, and I'll ask Dale to confirm this and maybe add a couple words. Those are not a part of, we're not approving those through this budget process. Those have to go through their own notification process and public hearing process, which is pretty common for those of you, for everyone who's been on council for a bit. Dale, could you maybe say a word or two to confirm that and anything that's worth adding?
Yeah, you bet. I think, we've, all of our utilities have gone a long period of time without a rate increase, but we are at the point in order to maintain and our level of service and accomplish our goals. We're going to need that. Also, we need to continue to maintain our debt covenants. But it was important to talk about this during the budget process as we inform the budgets. But we do have a rate making process that's separate than this, and so it would be this fall. The public hearings and the other requirement under state law is that there is a notification of every ratepayer on the system. So that would be all part of this that could happen this fall.
Great. Thanks, Dale. Take some questions. Heather.
Thanks, Brian. Logan, you said something that caught my eye, or my ear rather. You said, I think it was on the wastewater rates on that particular page. Right there. How we have the lowest rates in the state and how it makes us ineligible for obtaining grants. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, the Treasure State Endowment Program is a grant program, and part of the eligibility for that, they look at your combined water and wastewater rates as a percentage of median household income. And there's sort of a minimum level that those rates need to be in order to be eligible for that program. And I don't have the details, but my understanding from the past is that our combined rates are too low to make us competitive for that program.
Thank you.
All right, not seeing additional questions, and there will be an opportunity as we go through that rate making process and the different utilities to dive into details, which I know I'd like to do on some of those details, but good to have this context within budget. But again, the rate making process will be its own process in the fall. Not seeing any other folks queued up. Thanks, Logan.
Thank you all very much.
I believe streets operations and maintenance is next.
Good morning, Brian Hensel, Deputy Public Works Director for Streets Operations and Maintenance. You guys hear me okay?
Loud and clear, Brian.
All right. All right, so here's our little flow chart here. We have street maintenance, communication shop, and traffic services. And what isn't shown on here is cemetery. They should probably also be on this flow chart. All right, let's jump right in here. So here's a bunch of bullet points for our FY21 accomplishments and goals. They're all kind of intermixed. They're not really in any necessary order. I'll focus on some of the main ones. First one is in FY21, we chip sealed 14 miles of centerline streets. And I wanted to bring this one to our attention is that the chip seal program is probably our most effective way to maintain asphalt condition on city streets. We can cover a lot of ground and we spend around $600,000 to do 14 miles of street, which is a great centerline mile for the dollar if you were to compare it. And the reason that we can do that is the city is fortunate that we have all the equipment necessary to do our own chip seal. I'm not aware of any other municipalities, maybe Kalispell, they have everything. But we're lucky to have all that. And this year it was my 21st years of chip sealing for the city. And the first day out, our chip spreader broke down. It's a machine that's 25 plus years old. We're not able to get parts for about 16 weeks. And I scrambled and called everybody in the state who I could think that had a chip spreader, but everyone uses chip spreaders this time of the year. And I finally found a backup for a backup that I was able to get working. And we still have a week to go. We're about 3.5 weeks behind schedule. And as I say, the chip seal program is so important for us to maintaining our asphalt condition. And it also segues nicely into the next line item. Well, the third one, potholes, everyone's favorite subject, my least favorite. Last year, 7,200 potholes patched. I did not put a goal for FY22 for potholes, but let's just say I'm hoping the goal will be less. It's hard to say. I mean, I could guess, but it's so contingent on number of potholes, on weather condition, and then how much work we get done the prior season for maintenance. The next one, 33 ADA ramps were upgraded. I bring those up because those are tied also to our pavement maintenance program. So anytime we're paving through an intersection that may have ADA ramps that are no longer in current specification under PROAG rules, which is public right-of-way assessment guidelines, accessibility guidelines, sorry. We're required to go in and bring them up to the current specification, which requires our 3-person concrete crew, rip out the old ones, install them in new ones, and then these have to be done prior to the paving work. So this is a big effort. It takes us a lot of time and resources to get these done, to try and keep up with our paving program. Next one, we redug and installed 8 sumps. That was down a little bit. I would attribute that. We normally do like 30 to 35 a year, but we're trying to make that surplus cemetery property to the north side available for resale. And we're having to move a whole bunch of stockpiles during the same time that we would normally been digging sumps. So that's why that one's down. Sweeping program last summer. And actually in prior years, we've been able to only sweep the city 2 times per our normal summer sweeping schedule. And we've been running about 2 to 3 weeks behind. I'll get into that more here as we go through. Next one, the utilizing the pavement management system. A lot of you may remember, I think it was 2 years ago, we brought forward a request with mobility, air and staff to purchase a pavement management system. And what this has allowed us to do is we can get a current evaluation of asphalt condition, and then we can focus our resources on trying to preserve asphalt condition on streets that it's worth spending the money on. And then we can hopefully preserve those streets in reasonable condition for a longer amount of time versus spending a whole bunch more money on streets in poor condition that really you're not really getting the bang for your buck by doing that. So this system has been a huge benefit for us. And specifically, we're chip sealing in the Pleasant View subdivision. These streets are probably 15 to 16 years old. They really haven't had a whole lot of maintenance other than maybe some pothole patching. And using that system, it really geared us to look at, all right, this is a prime time to chip seal these streets. The asphalt isn't too far gone, and we can go in there and get those streets. We can buy another 20 to 30 years of use out of those. Goals. I kind of talked about chip seal. I always want to bump up our milling and paving, hopefully 4 miles. I'd like to do more of the ADA ramps, but I'm kind of required to do those if I increase my paving. This one will make more sense when you see my CIP requests, but we need to use a new bike lane sweeper to sweep some of these multimodal routes improvements, like the Russell Bridge project and all the approaches. We have the Bear Tracks Bridge that should be coming online next summer. And then as the Mullen build is completed, the city will be building more of these separated bike lanes and pedestrian pathways that need to be swept, need to be cleaned. And the reason that we need this bike lane sweeper is that it's narrower, it's not as heavy as a full-size street sweeper, and it will enable us to be able to get on and maintain these smaller paths. This next one, I could go on and on about this one, but continue to coordinate our paving maintenance with utilities and then our multimodal goals with infrastructure mobility staff. This is such a huge deal. And we have done a great job the last few years of really coordinating and communicating with each other, where that all of our projects can come into line and we can achieve our goals together. For example, if we're on a street that's in poor condition, but water needs to do a mainline replacement, water main can come in first. And then once the asphalt's done, then the multimodal improvements can be made. Ben and Aaron want a bike lane here. We can all coordinate our efforts, efficiently use our resources. 3rd Street from Orange to the railroad tracks was a prime example of that. All the public works divisions coordinated together, cooperated. We got that project done. That was a huge endeavor by a whole bunch of folks, especially with the old trolley line being buried underneath. So there's a prime example of that, and we'll continue to do that. We have some other projects. Logan mentioned a couple, Aaron did. We got Mount coming up, Beckwith. So we'll continue to do that. That's such a huge benefit for the taxpayers in utilizing our revenue. Let's see, chip spreader, I mentioned that one. I'm going to be looking forward in FY23 of either buying a new one or a used one, and that may come along in my FY23 budget request. Unfortunately, new chip spreaders are around $250K to $300. May have to go with used. But as I just want to stress the importance of that chip seal program. And admittedly, I'll use that chip spreader for 3 weeks, but when you're spending over $600,000 to preserve hundreds of thousands, maybe in the $1 million of assets, it's money well spent. So this next one goes in line with our pavement management system for FY22 goals. Is I would like to work with city staff and administration to see what level of condition that we would like to establish for our local streets. The PMS brought into the light that our arterials and collectors are in reasonably good condition, having a PCI, that's pavement condition index, of around 78 to 80, which is pretty good. And admittedly, I don't get a whole lot of pothole requests on our arterials and collectors. They're primarily in the local streets and the neighborhoods, which I'm sure all of you would agree with me on. So right now, the current condition, well, I should say in 2020, TMS identified our local streets were running about 68 to 70, which is fair condition, according to national guidance on pavement condition. And I would like to determine should we try to bring those local streets up to the same condition as arterials and collectors. I think that would be a great goal, and it would be wonderful to achieve it. But according to the PMS, they're saying we would need to spend an additional $8.7 million. So I wanted to mention it. It's something I want to start working on with staff. Next one. All right, communication. So this is the shop that maintains all the radio communications for the city, for the vehicles. They also do maintenance on city signals and MDT signals. Rick Larson is the superintendent, and I did bring him here in case you guys have some technical questions that I am unable to answer. So last year, FY21, Rick was able to upgrade 44 city-owned streets to LED. That should be street lights, where he's replacing the old inefficient, what are they, phosphorus incandescents? Yeah, high pressure sodium, inefficient, more power consumption. We switched 44 of them to LED, better lighting, less power consumption. A lot of Rick's time and his crew are spent on working on public works and police department vehicles. He was able to install video systems in 5 patrol cars and communications and emergency lighting on 11 police vehicles, so a total of 16. These take a lot of effort and they take a lot of technical expertise, especially when they change the brands of vehicles from one year to the next. So like we used to have all the Dodge Ram Chargers, now they're going to Ford. So I really want to commend Rick's staff and his crew, because it's a big deal when they switch over. And don't ask me all the specifics, but that's what Rick tells me. And installing